Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers.
All right, Brewer fans, welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast with myself, Craig, and my co-host, Vince. How's it going?
It's going all right, Craig. How are you doing, man?
All right. So the Milwaukee Brewers, second place here in the NL Central as we enter mid-June. So yeah, let's just go over a little bit how about the season's going. I know it's been a little bit since our last podcast. This is a busy time of year for all of us. So I guess a couple of takeaways, I guess, for starters. The Cubs offense has been a little bit better than I thought it would be, and the Brewers offense is a little bit more lacking than I thought it'd be. Our pitching has somehow held together with many pieces of duct tape in the first couple of months of the season, and the Brewers pitching magic somehow continues in spite of all of that, which is pretty interesting. With all that being said, we've been traversing. I really feel like we put ourselves in a position to really make a nice run here in the second half at a playoff spot in the division title still. And yeah, so I think that's the biggest takeaway from my end of it. What about yourself, Vince?
Yeah, I think that, back in spring training a couple months ago, looking at all the injuries that we had in our starting rotation, I certainly would have expected that it was going to be our starting rotation and those injuries, which would have caused us to, not be leading this division. And surprisingly, that's not the case. It's definitely the offense. I think that this team still needs some power. I really think that we're lacking in that department. So I know that Jackson Trio hit his 12th last night, which was pretty exciting. We've seen some guys, I think, start to swing the bat a little bit better, including Joey Ortiz. But I still think that we've, just got this huge offensive hole on the left side of our infield that's really causing some problems and concerns for me long term. And, the team has been treading right around 500. It seems like the entire, first couple months of the year where we're, 3 or 4 games up, and then all of a sudden we lose, 2 series in a row, and we're right back to around that 500. So I really hope that we're better than a 500 team. I think that we are. I think that we've got the talent level to do it. I still think that we're going to need to infuse some power somehow into this lineup, and I'm not really sure exactly how, and I think we'll get to it later on in this episode. Maybe we took a step in that direction today.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all that assessment. Well, speaking of help on the way, let's stay on the pitching side of it. Just last night, pretty exciting times. Our big-time pitching prospect, Jacob Misiorowski, made his major league debut against the hated St. Louis Cardinals and pitched nearly 6 no-hit innings.
No hit.
Again, he give up 4 walks, struck out 5. His first 3 pitches as a major leaguer all exceeded 100 miles an hour, including his very first pitch as a Brewer was the fastest pitch by a Brewer since this tracking started in like 2005. So I guess what are your thoughts on his arrival?
I mean, I'm really pumped. I know our minor league analyst Brandon is not high on Misiorowski, but I respectfully disagree with our friend Brandon. I think that Jacob Misiorowski and his arrival in Milwaukee is on par with, some of the other big debut arrivals for Brewers pitchers from our system in the past, which has been a pretty short list, to be honest, until the last 5 seasons or so. I think that, he's obviously gotten a lot of hype in the minor leagues for a reason. His arm is electric. I think that he's taken some steps to improve his control this year, and that's been a real exciting part of his development as far as I can tell, just kind of looking at it from a distance. And I think that you saw the stuff play out last night, and I think that it's unique enough where he does bring that extra element of excitement to both the Brewers rotation and to the Brewers generally. Maybe he is the shot in the arm that this team needs. And clearly the team has made a decision that we're going to, kind of move in the direction of some of these younger arms. And I think at the same time, it's exciting for this year because I think he does infuse that excitement. But I'm also really, really excited about the Brewers pitching staffs in the coming seasons as well. And that's not to take anything away from the possible, run that this team can make here in 2025. But I'm really excited about the long-term ramifications for the Brewers in the starting rotation because of guys like Jacob Misiorowski.
Yeah, no, and in Brand's offense, part of his analysis came from witnessing him in several appearances in spring training where Mizorowski was really having a hard time with his command. And Brandon, I think, was under the impression that Mizorowski's lack of command would very quickly push him to the back of a bullpen, which again would still make him a valuable piece, but a little bit disappointing. I think the Brewers were right to stick with Mizorowski in the rotation as it, and I know that you agreed with me on that. And it's really looking like he has the upside of an ace. I mean, if really, I mean, not to overhype it, but I
Yeah,
really feel like he's like a right-handed version of Chris Sale. If he can even,
yeah.
rein in his lack of command to just decent control, he's got unhittable stuff. He's got some of the best stuff in the minor leagues,
Yeah,
and now with the
yeah.
major leagues, and pretty much possibly some of the best raw stuff of any Brewer pitcher, safe to say, ever, actually. So, I mean, it's pretty exciting
Well, I
stuff.
mean, like, and I don't want to get too far ahead of our skis on this either. He's made one appearance in the major leagues, but that being said, you look at other guys who have that wingspan throughout baseball history, and I'm particularly looking at Randy Johnson, who obviously was a left-hander. But I look at a guy like that who's got the large wingspan, and I think maybe those and Randy had a lot of those same types of control issues earlier on in his career. In fact, that's why the Expos gave up on him, a year or two into big league his big league career. And I think that there's some similarities, honestly, between the two guys, and I think that Mizorowski, if he can figure out even take a couple of his developmental facets this season, and move those ahead going forward too. I think that his his ability to throw strikes is going to outweigh his wildness, and I think that he is going to continue to work on his control to the point where it's not going to be a severely limiting factor. I think it's always going to be something he has to work on, but I don't think it's going to be a disabling feature of his game.
Yeah, no. So could not be more excited. Agree with you. Randy Johnson is a great comp early in his career. Again, with the long limbs, the again really tall guy, obviously. Just finding and basically mastering pitching is not an easy thing, even for someone of not that stature. So the fact that it takes them a little bit longer, I think, is going to be fine, and we'll weather through Mizorowski's growing pains as Brewer fans. I think that the plan should be to stick with him in the rotation from this point going forward, outside of absolutely catastrophic control issues. And I feel like he's going to be a super valuable head of our rotation for a very long time. That's exciting stuff as a Brewer fan. And not only that, but as he's arrived now, and I think he can really help us out in the second half even. Now,
Yeah, yeah, I think so too.
one of the offshoots of him
So,
entering the rotation is Aaron Civale got pulled from a rotation. Now, we did acquire him last trade deadline for, I think, a low-level outfielder. And the Brewers, once they moved into the bullpen, he immediately requested a trade. I know, speaking of Brandon, he was a little bit upset with the fact that he immediately requested a trade and kind of threw a little fit, so to speak. I wasn't as bothered as much by it, but anyway, what was your take on Savali's reaction after being moved to the bullpen?
I agree more with Brandon on his anger directed at Civale and his camp, and I only say that because you don't necessarily need to play these things out publicly. And I get Civale's position, and I get that he came out and also said this isn't personally directed at like the fans in Milwaukee or his overall experience as a Brewer or anything. So with all that being said, you undercut the negotiating position of the team, even if they are wanting to trade you. And I think that that's really what kind of bugs me a little bit is that when Civale talks publicly or his agent leaks information publicly to guys like Ken Rosenthal, our colleague at the Athletic, I think that you find your negotiating position is just hampered to the point where you may not get as much back for him in return because other teams know that you've got this disgruntled guy that doesn't want to be there. So you're backed up against the wall. I mean, how long can you carry Aaron Civale on your team with the roster crunch that the Brewers have in the starting rotation and even in the bullpen? Like you've got a guy out pitching in the bullpen who doesn't want to be there. That's clearly going to come back to haunt the Brewers on some level if we don't get rid of him. So I think that my issue isn't that Civale was upset about being moved from the rotation, but my issue is that I just think that he put the Brewers in a bad position to negotiate.
Yeah, I know, I agree with that assessment. I do understand Savali's immediate position of not wanting to move to the bullpen for the sole reason that he's literally never pitched in a bullpen at any point of his career. going back to like high school, he's never pitched out of bullpen, period. So to be asked to do something you've never done for the first time in your entire career is also a little bit, it's like you signed up for a job somewhere and then they're having you do something else. And again, it's different because of the team concept. You're getting paid handsomely, all that stuff. I get it. With that being
Yeah,
said, he is up for as a free agent at the end of this season. I think that tanks his value. If you're a middle reliever or something, or any type of bullpen guy, not a non-closer, your value for your next contract is going to be severely hampered. And I think that he was seeing that immediately, thinking, okay, I need to stay in a rotation somehow. And so I think that was
yeah,
catalyst for his real request for being traded is his own self-worth. And again, even being acquired last year for the Brewers, I think he knew that he was a short-term member of the Brewers, like a year and a half tops, and therefore is basically pitching for his next contract just as much as he is pitching for the team's success, which sounds selfish and whatever, but I mean, it's the reality of the situation. And so, with all
sure.
that now water under the bridge, the Brewers have actually, Matt Arnold very quickly granted his request and traded him to the Chicago White Sox in return for former number 3 overall pick in the 2019 draft, but failed major leaguer, and that's Andrew Vaughn, first baseman for the
I,
White Sox. What's your reaction to that trade?
I take umbrage at calling him a failed major leaguer, Craig. And the reason I'm saying that is, yeah, he has not lived up to his potential, and I still say he has potential. So let me just throw that out there. But I was looking over his stats today. That Scotty's interns got to me a little slower than I would like, but they finally did get me his stats, and they said, and I thought it was interesting. He has had double-digit home runs all of his seasons in the big leagues. I mean, he's got 5 this year, but obviously the year is still young enough to compensate for that. So to me, that was kind of interesting. And just sort of looking at his stats, I do think that the Brewers' lack of power has been a glaring hole in this team. I think that the lack of bench power has been a glaring hole, and I understand he profiles fairly similarly to Jake Bauers in some ways. But that's fine. If you've got a couple power bats off the bench, that's a good problem to have. And respectfully to guys like Daz Cameron, and I know we didn't bring Vaughn in to play the outfield. The Brewers already announced that today, but I don't view him as a huge power threat off the bench. Like Isaac Collins has been getting a lot of at bats even as a starter, but I don't view him as being a huge power threat. They've got other good components of their game, but I do think that Vaughn's big asset is to provide a bit of power, and he's been able to do that in his 4 seasons in the big league so far. And I don't know. So for me, it's not like he's a complete failure. I think he just has a skill set that you got to use correctly. And I will also say that I think that given the Brewers' track record and ability to coach certain guys and sort of bring that inherent talent out of guys, maybe in a way that the White Sox staff couldn't do, I think is a real possibility when you look at the Brewers and what they've been able to do with other players. And really quickly with these stats, he had 15 home runs as a rookie, 17 in 2022, 21 home runs in 2023, and 19 last year. To me, those are worth looking at, and I think that you can see at least the potential there, and certainly to get something for Civale at this point again after he kind of I think cut out the legs of the Brewers as the trade negotiations were going on. I'm pretty happy with this return that we were able to get something of value for him at this point.
Great points. I will backtrack on my comment. I'm referring to him as a failed major league, and I apologize to Mr. Vaughn and his agent. But the what I meant to say is a failed former top prospect, as he was, in the top
Yeah,
30 prospects in all of baseball. Coming out of college, University of California, I think he was thought, being a top 5 pick as a first baseman is almost unheard of. And so the
yeah,
fact that he
yeah,
was his hit tool coming out of college was supposed to be like 300 hitter, 30 home runs, 100 RBIs as a major league, which is great profile for a first baseman and why you'd pick him that
yeah,
high. He has been nothing of that, even all the way back to his minor league number. So what he has kind of settled in on is he's got a decent idea of the strike zone, which is always nice. But he's really settled in as more of a 250-ish hitter with 15 to 20 home run power as a major leaguer, and that is replacement level. And the Chicago White Sox, who he was a member of the Chicago White Sox as a first baseman, a middle order hitter in a league in a season last year where they had a historically bad season. He was a big part of that. I had to say the bottom line is he's a replacement level to the point that and the worst team in baseball sent him down to the minor leagues this year. So with that being said, he is
yeah,
this is
yeah, yeah. That's
exciting.
a fair point.
Back to just analyze the trade. Once once Civale said he wanted to be traded, I was like, okay, well now we're gonna maybe be able to get possibly just a rental bat from him, but we have a very limited window, and now he's hampered his value, like you mentioned. I wasn't too happy about the situation. With that being said, knowing that we needed to flip some pitching for some offense, anyways, I was like, well, here's maybe an opportunity. I think the Brewers did better on the trade than we did because of they're going for a high upside pick still. I mean, he's entering his baseball prime he's in his age 27 season, which is always your best year as a hitter. Granted, he's
Yeah.
been toiling in the minor leagues and not even hitting that well for 100 or so at bats down there. I think the bottom line is he does have some power, not enough to really profile as a corner infielder in a major league level, but apparently that's never ever bothered the Brewers regime before, as we keep. So he fits right
You
into
got Caleb
their
Durbin at third, and yeah,
urban. But it fits kind of into their profile as a guy can hit, he can field his position, and but with that being said, unfortunately, yeah, he doesn't play the outfield. He's going to basically first base only, which really limits his where he can be played as a Brewers right now. And obviously with Hoskins, Bauer, I think he's more acquired for like Yelich insurance, to be quite honest, at the DH position, which sounds crazy, but Yelich just returned from
yeah,
injury yesterday during Mizrowski's debut, but I think that back flare up or the nagging injury thing with him at this stage is a possibility, and having a little bit of backup is a good thing. Uh, I should point out the key is that Vaughn is actually controlled through arbitration process through next season. As of right now, he'd probably be uh, um, a non-tender candidate. At this point, the Brewers would probably not even tender him a contract. I think he made 5.8 million
right,
this year. From the flip
yeah.
side, this makes a ton of sense for the White Sox actually because they can let Civale pitch in rotation for a month and then flip him at the deadline for a prospect better than they probably would have gotten for Vaughn. So it
Well,
kind of makes
and
sense.
that's the thing, Craig, because I totally agree with that. I don't mean to interrupt, but
Yeah,
Savali, I was kind of puzzled by this, thinking, okay, why would the White Sox get him? But this is a move we've seen with other teams over the past couple of years, where teams like Pittsburgh might take on somebody just to flip them, and I think it does make a lot of sense because it's a gamble. The worst case scenario, they get a serviceable starter for their rotation, and they're on the hook for the same financial outlay that they were going to pay Vaughn anyways, who is currently sitting in their AAA team in Charlotte or whatever, and Civale, I think if he does put together a string of 3 or 4 weeks before the trade deadline of quality starts, they're going to get more than Andrew Vaughn did. And that's where I come back to the Brewers were in a bad position. Number one, because of the roster crunch. And number two, because they couldn't, Civale forced their hand early. So we couldn't take a gamble on him having, some quality appearances out of the bullpen even, or subbing in for another starter if there's another injury. And the Brewers then flipping them. So that's why I'm kind of mad at our negotiation and leverage being cut out. But I
yeah.
think the White Sox will probably get a better return than Andrew Vaughn in 3 or 4 weeks' time.
That's probably true. But with the Brewers being contenders, it would have been hard for us to trade him to another contender, probably vying for a wild card spot or a division title like us. Someone
Yeah,
giving us something helpful for this season. I think that the main thing is we wanted to try to get something that would help us. We didn't necessarily need to restock the farm by trading him, which would have been nice. But I think we really didn't need a piece that would help, kind of a win now, help us now piece and we definitely need bats. Getting back to our struggles on offense, that'll maybe be a good segue into our next spot. I am kind of happy with the potential upside of the return and whether or not, maybe there's just a hitting coach or something that can tweak something for him and he can,
yeah,
reach his. I honestly still think if he has the ability to hit 280 with 20, 25 home runs as a major leaguer, as a decent fielding first baseman, right-hander, I mean, he's kind of almost like could possibly be a next season's replacement for Reese Hoskins, who will be a pending free agent. So it's one of those
that's
looking
that's my
looking.
concern right now. That's my concern right now because I don't necessarily want that to be the case. But fair enough.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the Brewers are still have that focus, that bargainish focus, and they don't really value power like you and I do at the corner infield spots. So getting to that real quick, I didn't want to mention. I don't think we've had a podcast since this happened, but the Brewers did sign as a free agent Bobby Dahlbach, who is one of my favorites. Again, he's I think 28 years old already, a little bit past his prime too. But he's down here
Yeah,
hitting at Nashville since we signed him a couple of weeks ago, and I think he's had like 7 home runs in the organization already in less than a month. I do think he is a cheap source of power. I call him Travis Shaw 2.0, and the fact that he's right-handed instead of left-handed, but he could be the mayor
And
of
came from Boston. I mean, I
yeah.
know he was with the White Sox most recently, but also played in Boston.
Yeah. So I obviously he's got strikeout issues with his swing or whatever, but honestly, I think if he had 500 at bats from major league level, there's no doubt in my mind he'd hit 30 to 35 home runs. That's something the Brewers don't necessarily have at their corner infield positions. We have,
No.
light hitting guys and not only that, but Dahlback can play first, third, a little bit of backup shortstop, and he even plays, I believe, corner outfield in a pinch. So that's a pretty valuable, versatile
Yeah.
piece with power, even if it's even just a bench bat. So anyway, I'm a little excited about that signing, but again, we'll see if, and now with the Vaughn signing, I don't know if they'll necessarily need him as far as the first base fill-in, but anyway, even if it's a
Yeah.
DH backup,
I was going to say really quick, Craig, I think, with Dahlbeck, I like him too. And I've said this to you in our pre-production meetings. I've said this, on our show as well. I still, and I love Caleb Durbin. I really just think that he's best fit for a utility role. So I'm still on the market for a third baseman. I would love to see it. I think that, the fact that Durbin can play 3, 4 different positions is a huge asset that we're not fully taking advantage of by starting him every night at third base. You lose some of that power because that's just not his game. I think he does get you, 10 to 15 home runs going forward, when he plays a whole season in the big leagues, and that's great. But I think that he can do that in a utility role. So I say that with a lot of love and respect for Caleb Durbin and the type of game that he plays and wanting him to play most nights, but maybe not as your starting third baseman every night. So anyways, I just wanted to kind of point that out to your point on Dahlbeck. And I also wanted to tie the bow here on the Andrew Vaughn conversation. I just heard from our anonymous source, Tom Carter, and he told me that Vaughn, yeah, TC, but it's Tom Carter. And Tom mentioned that Vaughn is going to be sent to AAA Nashville. So he's not actually joining the team in Milwaukee. He's going to go continue to get at bats in the minor leagues. There were a series of roster moves today that occurred right after the trade. And according to Tom and our colleague Kurt Hogue from the Journal Sentinel, the Brewers have also placed Daz Cameron on the paternity list, recalled pitcher Grant Anderson to take the spot of Aaron Civale on the pitching staff, and also newly acquired Drew Avens, who we just acquired from the Sacramento Athletics, is being recalled today to take Cameron's spot while Cameron's on the paternity list. So congratulations to Daz. And if Drew gets into a game as a Brewer, he will be making his Brewers debut as well.
and he will one day meet Vince Travato, or at least get a mail with a custom card from him. So
Yeah, he will.
we'll see if he's I don't know if you're keeping track of the numbers on the all-time Brewer list, but welcome to the Brewers organization, Drew. And
Yeah, no, we are. And in fact, we did make sure to have our interns post last night. Jacob Mizorowski was the 1,035th player in all-time Brewers history.
And he'll go down as possibly one of the best Brewers pitchers in Brewers history too. And then I'm staying that well in advance of that actually happening. But
Wow, I hope so.
That's my take on it. Okay, so yeah, so okay, so getting back to Dahlbeck, last thought on him is that when we signed him, that was my thought is kind of Caleb Durbin, third base insurance. But the fact that he's versatile, it could even be a bench power bat that we could use later in the season. But anyway, so I kind of like that signing. And then let's see. A couple of things. Vince, you and I attended one game at American Family Field this year, and it was against, you've together, I should say.
Yeah.
And that was early season, April, and we saw Nestor Cortez pitch a great game for the Brewers, and then he got injured, and we thought, well, hopefully that's not his only start. But unfortunately, months later, that has been his only start. Now it's rumored that he's probably going to be.
I called it that night, Craig. I think I called it that night.
Yeah,
we may have seen Nestor's last start as a Brewer.
Unfortunately, it's been the case 2+ months later. Now word is that he might not be ready till the All-Star break. We also have the unfortunate news that in his rehab assignment, Brandon Woodruff got hit with a comeback and liner on the arm and is now dealing with that. Unfortunately, poor guy. He'll, I think, still contribute at some point in the second half. At this point, are you expecting anything out of Nestor Cortez, who will become a free agent at the end of this season as Milwaukee Brewer?
No, I'm not. And I actually was about to mention the free agency aspect because I don't think that Brewers are, well, I guess it's kind of up to Nestor too. I don't think that there's going to be any rush back for Nestor. I think that he's going to want to take care of himself so that he can position himself a certain way in free agency. That being said, I think he's going to have to pitch a little bit in order to get the contract that he wants, or he's going to have to sign a, kind of show them that you're okay 1 year deal with somebody, which could even include the Brewers. And I think that the question comes down. I was going to say maybe we throw him in the bullpen, which is not where Nestor's comfortable, I'm sure. But
He'll probably demand a trade.
then I start thinking, okay, we've already got DL Hall. Yeah, he might request a trade. We've already got DL Hall. We've already got Aaron Ashby in the bullpen as lefties. So I mean, we're really Nestor Cortez is an incredibly talented guy, and I'm sure he's doing some valuable tutelage to our young pitchers and whatnot. But I really don't know that there's a huge place for him right now because Chad Patrick to me has been one of the understated greatest surprises. And I know that he was ranked in terms of our pitching prospects going into the season. So it shouldn't be a huge, huge surprise. But quite frankly, I'd rather have Logan Henderson back on this team than see Nestor Cortez pitch again as a Brewer. And I'd probably
Or what about even
Robert
Nestor versus
Gasser.
Tobias Myers? I mean, I think
And that's the other
Logan
thing. Tobias
Henderson.
has pitched yeah. I mean, Tobias has pitched only a few times this year for the Brewers, and each time it's not quite up to Pat Murphy's standards. I actually don't think he's as awful. He's been pitching as badly as maybe his quick demotions after two starts indicated. But I do think that it's not good enough to stay in a rotation that's all of a sudden become hyper competitive. But I mean, going into the offseason, we're going to lose some guys, including Nestor, and I know Quintana's a free agent, but we're going to have some real hard choices to make. And do you bring back, any of the veteran arms that might leave? I still wouldn't mind seeing Quintana next year as a Brewer, but we're just running out of spots in this rotation. So I could see the Brewers either going to a 6-man rotation, or we may be looking for bats with our starting pitching depth at some point as well. And we may not be done trading starting pitchers this year either. And I do think that the Brewers have made a collective decision to go with the younger guys at this point, circling back to Cortez. And I think that's just because of the success of guys like, Logan Henderson and Chad Patrick, and seeing their ability to step into the rotation and do well. And by the way, I don't think it's going to be this year, but I think that DL Hall is also a great option as a starting pitcher. And the Brewers should definitely be given some credit for Quinn Priester already at this point as well.
Those are all great points, Vince. And getting back to Patrick, I think he's earned his way into the good graces of the organization with the way he's pitched, and I guess that's how it kind of should be when you do on-the-job training and you earn your keep, so to speak. That's what. And so the Brewers could have very easily had, and obviously Patrick's got minor league options. Could have said, well, you pitched great for us, kid, but now we've got healthy guys and we got Mizrowski to debut. We're going to send you down, but you'll be back with us and you're part of our future rotation plans. And he would have put his head down, been disappointed, and said, well, okay, yeah, I get it. I'm still disappointed. They didn't do that. Instead, what they did is they said, Aaron
No.
Civale, we're moving you to the bullpen instead, and kind of knew that would irritate him, and it did. And they did that anyway. So I guess that's their way to reward Chad Patrick for what he's done this year. And I think that's warranted. I think that's a good way to run your organization. However,
Yeah.
with that being said, at some point, like you said, there's guys that need innings, and they're, in my opinion, future rotation members of next year's and beyond's rotation. And you're talking about DL Hall, like you mentioned. You're talking about even Aaron Ashby, who got a nice little 3-inning save last night in relief of Mizrowski. But he could be a part of rotation or bullpen going forward. And then you've got Tobias Myers. You've got, like you said, Quinn Priester earning his keep, so to speak. And then you've
Yeah.
got Robert Gasser, who, again, just as another update, has finally started facing live hitters. So he'll be back in the minor
Yep.
leagues very soon, and possibly part of a September run. And so he's a big part of our rotation next year, too. So having too much pitching is a great thing. So there's no complaints coming from me. And now that we just flipped Civale for a hitter, I think the guys that we have and the options that we have on them, to a lot of the younger guys are arbitration eligible, can still have minor league options that can be shuttled back and forth. And again, we'll be able to manage. I think what we have, the depth that we have, was very, very good in my opinion. And I think that moving forward, it'll be an asset. And the Brewers will be able to
Yep.
manage around it as much as possible. With that being said, Cortez, I think, is kind of like well, let's put Cortez and Woodruff into the huge question mark of an unknown barrel.
Yeah.
Whereas if they do show themselves healthy, they need to be given a spot. And then at that point, maybe Patrick would be sent to the minors for a couple of weeks or whatever until that they can show they're healthy. In Cortez's case, maybe traded or whatever, and Woodruff's spot maybe then Patrick says, we'll see you next year, kid, or whatever, or in case of another injury or whatever. But the bottom line is. It's a good problem to have, and I'm lucky the Brewers have it because, yeah, I think it'll all
Yeah.
work itself out. The move that we made, I think, with Civale was kind of a necessity, and I think it'll be good long term. So, still really happy with our depth, and with Mizrowski's debut, I hope he's here to stay. So, I know that we're running
Well,
short on time here.
Harry Dalton used to have a quote, Craig. He said, "These are not problems; they're opportunities." So I think that that's a good way to look at it. Maybe a challenge, but not necessarily a problem to have all this starting pitching depth. I just want to say too, though, Ted Patrick has not only pitched well. I think that he's literally in the talk for National League Rookie of the Year, and I understand that we're only in not even quite mid June yet, so it's still way too early to have that conversation. But I also think we need to be cognizant of the fact that you've got guys who are actually posting results. And I know that Nestor Cortez has a decent track record, and I'm excited about seeing what he could still do in a Brewers uniform, and all of that is true. But I also think you've got a guy that's being successful right now on the field. So that is something that we need to be very cognizant of, and not upsetting the apple cart that's gotten. Again, we've maintained a decent place in the division. We're in second place as we're taping this today, and it's because of our starting pitching, not in spite of it. So I just think that's worth pointing out.
Absolutely. And you got to give the Brewers organization credit because they found another hidden gem in his mid 20s that other organizations have kind of moved on from. And last year was Tobias Myers, and this year is Chad Patrick. And so that's super exciting stuff. And the Brewers pitching lab, or whatever you want to call it, has been amazing, especially finding these hidden gems. Now, with that being said, as we see Tobias Myers now struggle this year, I think the caveat needs to be put out there that um, these guys are still young. They're having some form of success, but there could still be growing pains ahead. And I think that the Brewers are in position to weather any type of Chad Patrick growing pains moving forward, just like they put themselves in position to weather the current Tobias Myers growing pains, so to speak. And so, again, depth is all part of that. And the Brewers roster construction, I mean, it's just phenomenal. I mean, you cannot give Matt Arnold and the front office any more credit, or too much credit because they deserve all of it, in my opinion. They just do a phenomenal job to the
Yeah,
point where,
yeah,
I mean, organizational wise, we lose Davis Stearns and don't even miss a step. And managerial wise, we lose Craig Counsell and don't even lose a step because of how great Murphy is as well. So kudos to all around to the
yeah, man.
organization.
Just need some power. Just need some power.
Exactly. And if that's got to go all the way back to the top again. Don't give too much credit to the owner, Mark Antonazzi, because he's a little bit too thrifty for my opinion, but or for my taste,
Yeah,
I should say. But the bottom line is he's put those guys in position and let them do their jobs. And I think that there's some credit needs to be given for that because identifying that
yeah,
talent and then letting them go do what they do best. And in my opinion, he's done a pretty good job of being hands off. And I think that breeds a good path to success.
yeah,
The Brewers have seen that.
yep,
So I know we're running short on time. Real quick, just wanted to get on one
yeah.
because I know this is on the forefront of a lot of Brewers' minds. And again, he's a little bit of a hot streak here, but how much more of a leash does Joey Ortiz have with the bat in order to stay as a
Yeah.
major leaguer and not be replaced in some fashion. I know the Brewers, I think, currently don't have any in-house options that are better, and therefore I think he's been given a longer leash than most contending teams would give a player of like that he's been producing. But how much longer is this leash, and do you think that he'll bounce back to before they're able to move to a secondary option?
Well, this all comes back down to my point earlier on third base and the need to stabilize third base. Because if you have a power hitting third baseman, somebody that you can rely on consistently to provide, that real offensive anchor force on the infield along with your first baseman, then you can afford to carry a defensive minded shortstop, which is what Joey Ortiz is at the end of the day. I mean, even with his current hot streak, he's still hitting under the Mendoza line. So let's be clear about where he's at this season. And I do think that, the Brewers clearly identified him as a talent, somebody that was talented enough that we were going to prioritize him in a trade for our ace Cy Young Award winning pitcher in Corbin Burns from Baltimore. So I think that he's a talented guy. I think that he's a great defender. I think that he is he is literally a Gold Glove caliber defender, in my opinion, at shortstop. And again, he's playing a new position this year, essentially, after playing third last season. So, I think I like him a lot. I don't think that we should necessarily call up Zamora or somebody from AAA. I do wonder what we can be looking at in terms of Cooper Pratt and how soon he might be able to make the big leagues. I don't know what we're going to do with that situation on the infield, to be quite honest, in a couple of years. I mean, to me, there's a very clear path for Brock Wilken to be our starting third baseman even next season. But I don't know what we're going to do between Cooper Pratt and Joey Ortiz. If Joey goes back at that point to being a utility infielder, a defensive-minded utility infielder, or becomes trade bait, or he starts for a few more seasons because Pratt needs more development next year in AAA. I don't know, and that's definitely a topic for a future podcast. As far as this season goes, if I'm Matt Arnold, I'm looking at ways to upgrade the offense at third base, so that you don't have to worry quite as much about the offense from your shortstop, and then you can keep that defensive-minded strength up the middle. So that's my not great but quick and easy solution for 2025.
No, that seems like a pretty good solution. But if you look at the Brewers' struggles offensively, really a couple things. Christian Yelich is still, he's bounced back a little bit with bat, but not to his level of last year. And also there's some nagging injuries hanging there. Jackson Churio last year started his rookie season off kind of slowly and then really heated up in the second half. The same thing is kind of materializing this season. I expect him to have a big second half. Will be a huge shot in the arm for the Brewers offense. But really, what we're missing from last season's success is Willie Adames' production they gave us at the shortstop position, downgraded to what Joey Ortiz has given us, is just a huge chasm of production. And I think that's where the Brewers have their challenge for the second half to figure out where they're going to get that production back from because that losing of Willie Adames, and I get you could point out, well, he's not doing that well with the Giants this year, but looking at what he did and provided for the Brewers last year to what we are getting for Joey Ortiz, that's just not acceptable to be a successful team, a contending team. So I guess that's the challenge for the Brewers front office here as we enter the trade deadline. It wouldn't surprise me if they identify, a rental piece or something like that to help us out. Because like you said, the Brit, just to get Joey back, hitting well at AAA or something like that, and then be a part of our team next year, obviously, and whatever. But we'll see. And he could even turn around with a hot couple of weeks here and then, make a move on from that too. But with that being
would you
said,
call up Zamora from AAA? I mean, he's a stopgap. He's hitting fairly well in Nashville right now. I know he's not necessarily in our top 10 prospect list, but he is a guy that had some prospect pedigree in the past, and maybe he's a short-term solution just to see what you have there. I don't know. Maybe we're not at the point in the season where we can be experimenting, a ton with this, but I do know that, he would at least be serviceable at the major league level, and it would let Joey get some at-bats in AAA, and it wouldn't rush Cooper Pratt at that point either. So maybe that's an option.
That's an interesting idea and definitely an option. I don't feel the Brewers value Zamora enough to go with that option over Ortiz. So more likely, if I had to guess, if they were to do something, would be that they're willing to acquire anyone that can play short, second, or third that would give them similar Willie Adames production, and then shuffle around those infielders as necessary. And again, we already talked about the fact that we like leaving Terang at second, I should say. But if he had to move over to short to accommodate more production from short or anywhere on that left side of the infield, then I think it'd be an option over Zamora. But we'll see. One other thing, and again, we'll have another podcast coming up hopefully soon. But one last thing before we wrap it up here. What are your thoughts on who do you? It looks like this week a little bit of tinkering with top of the order. Again, as we predicted, Sal Frelick's having a nice breakout with the bat this year, and obviously Bryce Trang's holding his own on both sides. But what are your thoughts? Who's your preference as our leadoff hitter, Sal Frelick or Bryce Trang?
Oh man, I guess Frelick. I think Frelick. Yeah, I think Frelick can. They both can steal bases. They both get on base well enough. I think Frelick gets on base. Scotty's interns did not provide me with the stats in a timely manner today, but I think Sal's OBP is higher. I think that his game just kind of suggests leadoff hitter as well. So I'd go with Frelick personally.
Yeah, and there's really they're very similar in a lot of
There's
ways,
no
where they
wrong
can get on.
answer.
They're both left-handed.
Yeah,
They both get on base. I think they both have really good hit tool. They both have a lot of speed. I just like Trang feels like, and you've talked about this before. He's a really cool guy to have that down there like number nine here because then he can flip over and be on base.
yeah,
But
right.
there's just something about Frelick that there's just some kind of spark that the way that he plays the game, if we call it game or whatever
Yeah,
it is, there's some kind of spark he provides that just seems really
yeah,
suitable for the top of the order. And not taking away from Bryce Trang, but there's just a little bit of spark or flair that the way that he plays the game kind of I feel like motivates guys that are behind him. But anyway, that's just my take
yeah.
on it.
And if I had to pick, I know we probably don't get a vote this year as local media members, but if and I know we're not in mid June yet exactly, but if I were to vote on a team MVP for 2025 so far, it's Sal Frelick at this point.
Yeah, no, and I'm a big fan of him. It's my son's favorite player, and he doesn't. I don't know if he's got a nickname yet, but I mentioned this on a podcast like a year ago, or whatever. But like my nickname for him is gonna be Spark Plug. But we'll see. I don't know if I can get a campaign going or something like that. But there's
What
something
about an
about the
Igniter 2.0?
well, yeah, no,
Igniter
and I mean
2.0?
that's kind of it's a little bit of a callback to the igniter, obviously. So, but anyway, um, and that's even without really fully knowing how an engine works. So anyway, all right, well, hopefully you guys get out and enjoy summer baseball here in Milwaukee. Get out to AmFam Field, support this team. It's exciting, fun, young team to support with great uh, people in place at all levels of the organization. And so yeah, get out and support the team and root these guys on. And again, some exciting more development with Mizorowski's debut. You got to get out and see him pitch live. It's pretty fantastic. I'm sure I'm gonna hopefully
Yeah,
get there out there. I missed his debut last night, but I'm hoping to get out there AmFam here when he pitches here in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. So all right.
yeah. I actually have to admit, Craig, we made a last minute decision, so my dad and I snuck out quick to do that last night. So I was actually there
Oh, nice. Okay, awesome.
at the ball game. So it was
Good to
pretty
hear.
electric, kind of a last minute thing. We're up here for some family stuff, and
Yeah.
so made that quick decision to do that to sort of have a little diversion last night. So would have called you, but it was a last minute thing with my dad. So we just kind of went out and enjoyed the game. But Brew Curvy was on the scene, and it was pretty electric at the ballpark last night.
So I was actually working last night, and that's why I was unable to attend. So, but no, it's awesome that you were able to be out there, especially with your dad here as Father's Day weekend is approaching us. So very
Yep,
cool. So,
yep.
yeah, awesome. All right, well, you take care, stay classy, Wisconsin, and go Brewers.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, Chad. Thanks, Vikram. Go Brewers, guys.